To rent or to buy in the Philippines? It's a common question I get asked all the time. That being said, in today's video, we're diving into the pros and cons of renting versus buying in the Philippines and what you should opt for. Enough said, let's hop straight into this. First things first, yes, I'm aware that foreigners aren't legally allowed to own property in the Philippines. And the only way around this is by putting it under your spouse's name or putting it under a corporation. So in the context of when I talk about buying here, I'm exclusively talking about owning condos, alright? Because that is the only property type that foreigners are legally permitted to own. Now that that's out of the way, should you rent or should you buy? Well, you should first consider your own personal situation. My rule of thumb is, if you haven't lived long enough yet in the Philippines, I'd highly, and I mean highly, advise against you buying here. It goes without saying, but plunging a decent chunk of change into a property without having a feel and sense for the country isn't the most sensible thing to do. Because at the end of the day, and I've seen it firsthand, there's so many variables you have to take into account. Have you familiarized yourself with the location? Are there any ongoing issues with the property? Are the neighboring condos priced reasonably or are they more expensive? How are the amenities? So as for general consensus, until you've spent at least 6 months to a year within a specific location in the Philippines, you should only be renting. Better yet, what I personally advise the majority of my clients is that they should hop around for a bit. Maybe spend 2 weeks Airbnb in BGC, another 2 weeks in Makati, and another 2 in Cebu, for example. Because let me tell you, there are usually 2 non-residential types of individuals that'll come out to the Philippines. On one side of the coin, you have the tourists coming here on vacation. They have the intent to splurge on hotels perhaps and enjoy their time while out here before going back home to their home country. But on the flip side of the coin, you may have individuals like yourself. More likely than not, you've been exploring the idea for a while now to either retire, live full-time, or at least split time while out here in the Philippines. And with that, you might have considered coming out here to do a quick 1-month scouting trip just to get a feel for the place and see how things are. And if that's the case for you, I'd highly recommend that you book an Airbnb instead of a hotel just to get the true raw experience in living in one of the cities within the Philippines. If you do this, you can ask yourself questions like, what is it like to live in a condo within Manila? Did you find that things were constantly breaking down? How far was the walk from the nearest grocery store? How did staff treat you in that particular building you've been eyeing up? Were the units too small for your liking? These are the kind of questions that you get to answer yourself by lodging in an Airbnb as opposed to a hotel like a normal tourist would. With that being said, that now brings us to the question of when should you buy in the Philippines? Well, first things first, we need to understand one thing, and that is how much are you willing to spend? Decide first what your budget is and what in detail you want with your investment that you put down. Because I'll say, many foreigners have this preconceived notion that the Philippines is dirt cheap. And yes, while you can spend 20 to 30K USD out in the boondocks in the middle of nowhere or within these sketchy areas outside of the city, that's most definitely not the case within the nicer and safer parts of Manila. Because let's keep in mind, this move for you is quite literally a new chapter of your life. You're gonna be meeting new people on a daily basis. You're gonna constantly be experiencing new environments and settings, and not to mention all while doing that. And with all this change hitting you at once, I'd highly doubt that you'd want to be worrying about where the nearest hospital is, God forbid something goes south, why the Wi-Fi is so slow, or when the next blackout is going to occur. Because let's take into account that the Philippines is still a developing country. And I get it, while the allure of being able to spend far less for a property here compared to the West is there, at the end of the day, it does come with its own cons as well. So if you're going to buy, please do decide on 2 things. Where do you want to live and how much do you want to spend? Just as a reference, a couple months ago, I interviewed a friend on the channel, Michael, hailing from California, and he's a friend of mine who bought a condo here in BGC. And just for a 1-bedroom unit here, he spent 200K USD, which was pretty close to the heart of the city. So do set the expectation, if you are spending these large sums of money out here in the Philippines, it's because you're paying for 3 things. 1, scarcity. Very few places in the Philippines offer the kind of amenities that BGC does have to offer. 2, convenience. Nearly everything and anything is within a 15 to 20 minute walking distance for anything you could possibly want want or need. And I get a lot of these comments, Evan, you're being very snobby about BGC, but then again, the majority of this channel is expats that are retiring. And I can only imagine if you're retiring, you want scarcity and you want safety, but also number 3, the last thing that you're paying for is safety. When you come out to the Philippines, specifically to BGC, you're paying for peace of mind that you're living within a safe and highly secured city. That being said, the only time you should buy in the Philippines is when you're highly familiarized with that city. And also, of course, when you do have the capital to afford what you're looking for. And lastly, of course, which I haven't mentioned yet, if you do have plans of buying out here, it should be with the intent of you knowing you have clear-cut plans of retiring and staying long-term out in the Philippines. So if you're now in a place of life where you don't want to constantly be picking up your bags and going around, you just want a place you can call home, then buying, of course, would be a good option for you. But what I've personally seen with the majority of my clients, they buy more so for investment purposes. Because with them seeing that the Philippines and actually Southeast Asia in general is an upcoming market, they put their money out here to work for them within the real estate in Southeast Asia. Now, before we get into when you should actually rent in the Philippines, I understand that making such a big transition comes with many unknown variables. That's why if you need someone with boots on the ground experience that can take care of the A to Z logistics of your move, I'm talking finding and securing your condo, whether you're renting or buying, taking care of your visa work, getting your healthcare sorted, you name it. I'm your boots on the ground guy who will get it all done on your behalf. We've just opened up 5 more slots for the month of March, so you can apply to work with me in the link down below, and I'll see if you're a qualified fit to work together. Alright, it's time for us to address the question of when should you rent in the Philippines? In short, my answer would be almost in all cases. If you're not interested in investing, if you want to be light and mobile, able to pick up your bags and move, and if you don't want much time and financial commitment, then renting would be the best route for you to take. When you buy out here, it of course comes with much more variables than just simply putting money down and purchasing a condo. At that point, you're going to also have to consider variables like how do you go about transferring your USD, large sums of hundreds of thousands of dollars, into the Philippines without it getting flagged as money laundering. You'll also be staying out here long term, so you'll also probably have to think about potentially getting a special resident retiree visa. Not to mention, who's going to watch over your place while you're gone? So these are the kind of things that you really don't have the baggage to think about when you're renting as opposed to buying. It's easy, you can always renew your lease if you don't like the place, and it doesn't require much capital investment. For a solid 80 to 90% of you, renting would be the most sensible route to take. And I know I've already said it, but please, for the love of God, only rent if you've barely experienced the Philippines. You might have already watched hundreds of Philippine videos that entices you with the allure of Philippine life, and perhaps you might have even found a companion here that you want to stay long term with. But regardless of that, do not buy unless you're investing or unless you're 100% sure that the Philippines will always be your home. Or to be frank with you, unless buying a condo is chump change. Me personally, here in BGC, I'm doing a rent-to-own contract. I'm about 99% sure that the Philippines will always be my home at this point, and I don't really plan on going back to the US anytime soon. And besides, I will be continuing to stay in BGC. So for my first 3 years living in the Philippines, I rented. But as of last year, when I found my new place, I figured if I'm really gonna call this place home, I might as well put my rent towards something. So if you're like me, rent-to-own contract is a common route to take as well while living out here. Now, let's talk about the pros and cons of renting versus buying. First off, renting. The pros of renting is that moving physically is easy and moving money is easy. What do I mean by that? Well, of course, after your lease expires, you can always pick up and go. And likewise, moving money is easy because it's not like you're transferring huge sums of money within a single transaction. It's easy for me to get my money out of my B of A account through Remitly or Wise into my local Philippine bank account. And from there, paying rent is a piece of cake. Second pro of renting is that maintenance is provided. Having personnel already provided for your electrical, plumbing, garbage disposal, and security takes a lot of weight off of your shoulders. And of course, you have your amenities. And the only cons that I can think of with renting is that number one, decorations, design, and furnishings are under your landlord's approval. If you're like me, that's not a big issue. And the second minor con of renting is that you're tied to a lease agreement, but of course, that just comes with renting. Other than that, I couldn't come up with any other cons with the rental route. Now let's discuss the pros and cons of buying. The first and main pro of why you would buy is because it's an appreciating asset. Every year, the value of your unit can increase depending on the market, the location, and what upgrades you've made over the years. The third pro is a sense of belonging and home. It's priceless to have a home and to be integrated within a community of people that you can build lasting connections with. And besides, you do also have bragging rights to be one of the select few that actually outright own your place within a city. The last pro is you're fully in charge. Be it the decor or the paint color that you fancy on your walls, you don't have to answer to anyone. As for the cons, that's of course the issue of transferring your money. Depending on your contract, getting a lump sum of money into the Philippines could be a hassle. And if I'm not mistaken, anything over 10k USD or over 500,000 pesos will be flagged as money laundering here. Then of course you have to go with the whole process that comes along with buying in the Philippines, which you may not be familiar with. Next con, everything falls upon your shoulders. If there's a leak, a broken pipe, or an emergency, that would be on you. And the last con we have is that your property could potentially devalue from when you bought it. But all in all, those are the main pros and cons when you consider renting versus buying. Like I mentioned, this decision all depends on your own personal situation and what moves you want to make in your transition here. And so there you have it, savvy expats. Hopefully you now have a better idea of whether you should consider renting versus buying in the Philippines. Once again, if you need someone to guide you by the hand and get your move fully situated for you with boots on the ground experience and connections, apply for a call with me down below. If I do feel like I can help you and you're qualified to work with me, then we can move forward together. Other than that, wishing you a great day from the Philippines, and I'll see you in the next one. God bless.